Hello again, thanks for popping by. Today I thought we'd make a visit to Temple Station. We'll examine the history of the area and... oh, hang on. Wrong Temple Station. That's better. Now, where was I? Oh yes, I thought we'd make a visit to Temple Station, looking into the history of the area and taking a look at the railroad and the Heritage Museum in the original station building. You've probably worked out by now we're not hanging about the usual UK haunts. We're in Texas, USA. Now, I'm not the world's leading authority on US railroads, but I was intrigued by a video I saw on YouTube some time ago. So when the opportunity arose to visit Temple, it was impossible to turn it down. So, why is Temple here? The Gulf, Colorado and Santa Fe Railway was established in Galveston in 1873 to build a second railroad onto Galveston Island. The first railroad from Galveston, the Galveston, Houston and Henderson Railroad, was completed in 1860. But then residents of Galveston and Houston had a hissy fit with each other. Houston health officials sometimes declared a yellow fever quarantine against Galveston Island, cutting it off. In turn, Galveston Wharf Company, with the only wharf in the area accessing the Gulf of Mexico, brought in restrictive policies that were detrimental to Houston's interests. To counter this, Houston leaders tried to turn Buffalo Bayou into an ocean-navigable channel to the Gulf. Freight consigned for Galveston on the Galveston, Houston and Henderson didn't always reach Galveston, sometimes being offloaded in Houston or Harrisburg along Buffalo Bayou. At which point, Galveston decided it had had enough and it was time to build a new railroad bypassing Houston completely. Starting out from Galveston with a new bridge over Galveston Bay, the Gulf, Colorado and Santa Fe Railway's construction stayed well south of Houston, reaching Arcola in 1877 and Richmond in 1879. The railroad then went bankrupt and was purchased at auction by its treasurer, George Seeley, who reorganised the company under its original charter. Construction resumed in 1880 at Rosenberg and turned northwest to Brenham. In 1880, Jonathan E. Moore sold 187 acres of his land to the Gulf, Colorado and Santa Fe Railway for use as a construction camp, whilst the Gulf, Colorado and Santa Fe pushed north from Brenham. By 1881, the Gulf, Colorado and Santa Fe had made substantial advances by building 100 miles from Brenham to Belton and 128 miles from Temple to Fort Worth. The tracks to Belton passed through Temple and it became the branch point for the line north to Fort Worth. The site was called Temple Junction by the railroad company after a Santa Fe railroad official, Bernard Moore Temple, who was civil engineer and former surveyor with the Gulf, Colorado and Santa Fe. Local residents called the community Mudtown or Tanglefoot, its principal virtues being mud and a large number of saloons which often fortified the local residents to the point of insensibility. Walking the settlement could be tricky in those days. A post office was established in January 1881 and the official name of the settlement changed to Temple. The Gulf, Colorado and Santa Fe held a sale of town lots in June 1881 to the population of mainly railroad workers, and stores went up rapidly. The town was incorporated in 1882. As the tracks were being extended westward beyond Belton to Lampasas in 1882 and Brownwood in 1885, Temple was becoming a significant town at the centre of the Gulf, Colorado and Santa Fe's network. From Temple, lengthy tracks to Galveston, Fort Worth and Brownwood radiated out in different directions. In 1882, the Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad, the Katy, built through the town, and soon after, the Santa Fe Railroad made Temple a division point. The railroad workshops added several hundred to the community population, which also now included doctors, lawyers and merchants. By 1884, it had 3,000 residents served by 3 churches, a school, 2 banks, 2 weekly newspapers, an opera house, a waterworks, and a wide variety of other businesses. With its links to multiple routes, Temple became the division point, controlling the traffic over the Gulf Colorado and Santa Fe rails. When the original boxcar set up as the station was replaced by a two-story building in 1898, itself replaced by the present building in 1911, the division control moved into the first floor. That's second floor if you're from the US. Gosh, I find that so confusing. The central train control panel and some of the communications equipment is now on display in the Temple Railroad and Heritage Museum. And next to it is the current system used for controlling the trains, using computer connections. Note to nerds, in the USA it's possible to get equipment to view the train's positions on your own computer. Train travellers in the 19th century took their lives in their hands, with very little in the way of decent food and accommodation available. 20 minutes was allowed at a stop to eat, but often passengers had to leave before the food was ready. The unserved food was then recycled for the next travellers to arrive, and management and rail employees trousered the profit. Enter Mr. Fred Harvey. Frederick Henry Harvey was born in England in 1837 to mixed Scottish and English parents, and emigrated to the United States from Liverpool, England in the 1850s. In 1876, he offered to run railroad eateries and hotels for his employers, the Burlington Railway. Politely declining, they suggested the Atchison, Topeka and Santa Fe Railway, as they believed the AT&SF were game to try most things. While they were certainly keen to provide decent passenger facilities at the AT&SF fuel stops, and in 1876 the first Harvey House opened in Kansas. Temple received its Harvey House in 1899, the Gulf Colorado and Santa Fe Railway having merged into the AT&SF in 1886. It was reputed to be the largest on the network. Passengers' orders were telegraphed to the Harvey House ahead of the train's arrival, and passengers found their food and drink ready when they arrived. Placing ads in Midwestern and Eastern publications, Fred Harvey solicited women between the ages of 18 and 30 to travel west and work as waitresses in his restaurants. Other qualifications included being unmarried and of good character. The girls signed year-long contracts and lived next to or in the Harvey houses, under the close supervision of a Harvey girl with the longest tenure. If they left before the year was up, the most common reason for doing so was marriage, they forfeited a portion of their base pay. Not only did these waitresses provide pleasant, efficient service, but in the early years of Harvey's enterprise, at least, they were often the only single young women for miles around. That in itself would have been a draw, even if the food hadn't been up to much. The prototypical early uniform consisted of a long black dress, no more than 8 inches above the floor, overlaid with a starch white apron, black opaque stockings, and black shoes. When catering moved on board trains in the 1930s, the Harvey houses began to close. The house at Temple is now completely demolished, but here's the site of the building alongside the station house. The Santa Fe was among the first railroads to adopt a system-wide prepaid health and pension plan, operated originally by the Gulf Colorado and Santa Fe Hospital Association, formed by Galveston businessmen who owned the Gulf Colorado and Santa Fe Railway. Before 1891, railway workers were treated at St. Mary's Infirmary in Galveston, but the railway established a hospital in Temple because of its central location in the railway system. In 1889, 3 Temple City officials bought 10 acres and in March 1891 deeded it to the Hospital Association with a stipulation that the land would revert to the trio if it wasn't used for hospital purposes. The Santa Fe Hospital opened in June 1891 on South 25th Street in Temple, housing 20 beds and the staff quarters. It was replaced by a $90,000 4-story brick hospital in December 1908, further extended in 1915 and again in 1925. The wonderfully named Sisters of Charity of the Incarnate Word, the founders of St. Mary's Infirmary, worked as nurses, pharmacists, housekeepers and administrators of the Temple Hospital for 58 years until February 1949. The Gulf Colorado and Santa Fe Railway appointed a chief surgeon who was responsible for medical and surgical care at the Temple facility, as well as for a system of line physicians, one physician for every 15 to 20 miles of the railroad. The first chief surgeon was C.H. Wilkinson, MD of Galveston, but when he refused to move to Temple, railway officials hired Arthur Carroll Scott of Gainesville as the chief surgeon. He took up the post on October 1st, 1892. Scott hired several doctors as house physicians who lived at the hospital, including Raleigh R. White Jr. in 1895. When they formed a private medical partnership in December 1897, both were named chief surgeons by the Railway Association, equally splitting their salary. Their partnership evolved into the Scott and White Memorial Hospital. Only Scott and White physicians were granted privileges at the Santa Fe Hospital. And another noted physician at the Santa Fe Hospital was Claudia Potter, considered the first full-time anaesthetist in Texas and the first woman anaesthetist in the United States. A board consisting of Santa Fe officials oversaw the hospital until 1947, when the board was revamped to include representatives from trade unions. The Santa Fe Hospital remained exclusively a railroad hospital until July 1966, when it was reorganized as Santa Fe Memorial Hospital, open to the community and granting privileges to physicians outside of Scott and White. But the hospital continued to treat railroad employees. On July the 5th, 1983, Santa Fe Memorial Hospital and the Scott and White Memorial Hospital merged, and the new facility was renamed the Scott and White Santa Fe Center. Today, the Santa Fe Center provides general and specialized medical care. It also houses a medical research center operated jointly by Scott and White and the Texas A&M University Health Science Center College of Medicine. The Temple Railroad and Heritage Museum is open Tuesday to Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and at the time of making the video, the entrance fee was $4, concessions for children, seniors and military personnel. It's right next to the station with great views of the mainline tracks, so rail enthusiasts, or is that rail fans, can watch the action on the BNSF rails. At the far end of the museum plaza, you'll find Whistle Stop Playground and Santa Fe Park. There's a children's play area, lots of benches and picnic tables. Plus, you can watch the trains go by. It's got something I've never seen before, a handcart railroad. Not sure, but it looked around 2-foot gauge. Perhaps someone can let me know in the comments. Sadly not operating when we visited, but how much fun would that be? Outside the museum is a collection of rolling stock. Let's take a look. Missouri Pacific Caboose number 1243 was built in 1951 at the Sedalia, Missouri car shops, one of a group of 40 cars. It was rebuilt in 1963 and retired in 1976. It was donated to the museum in 1986. It is one of the only surviving 2 cabooses of this class. It caught fire in the fall of 2016, so was gutted and refurbished to serve as a party room and rental space for the museum. The only surviving historical component is the external metal shell. Missouri Pacific boxcar number 252476 was built in 1971 for the Missouri Pacific Railroad, with the car's huge doors measuring 10.5 feet tall by 9 feet 9 inches wide. It was designed to carry everything from cars to fresh produce. Purchased by the Union Pacific Railroad in 1980, it ran until the mid-1980s, coming to the museum in 1986. One thing the Temple Railroad and Heritage Museum isn't short of is cabooses. Or should that be caboose? Anyway, there's a little uncertainty over when this caboose was built, one source giving the year 1966, whilst the museum says it was built in 1973. I think I'm going with the museum on this one. What's not in doubt is MKT caboose number 140 was built by the International Car Company in Kenton, Ohio for the Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad. On withdrawal from service on the 1st of June 1989, the caboose was donated to the museum at Temple. A quick word about a caboose. Until the 1980s, all freight trains in the US were required to have a caboose. It was the logistics centre of a freight train. It served as the conductor's office, kitchen, bedroom, as well as a lookout for the crew, who kept an eye on the train as it travelled along the rails. The cupola on top of the caboose served as an observation platform from which the crew could monitor the train's movement and condition whilst it was in motion. The caboose is usually fitted out with a stove or heater, fridge, battery-powered electrical system, a bathroom, radios and seats that converted into beds. Number 140 is in the MKT's latter-day green and yellow paint scheme. Burlington Northern and Santa Fe Diesel number 1680 is a GP9U general-purpose locomotive, built by General Motors' Electromotive Division at LaGrange, Illinois in 1957. By the end of the construction period between 1954 and 1959, the class finally numbered some 3,466 units in total. Over 20 units are known to have been preserved. The bright, what was named yellow bonnet colour scheme was designed for safety, making the locomotive easier to see at crossings. This unit started life as AT&SF GP9 number 742. It was renumbered number 2942 in 1970 and rebuilt at Cleburne, Texas in 1980 as 2296. It became BNSF 1680 in November 1999. The locomotive finished its operational career in BNSF's General Freight Service as a result, it seems, of its involvement in an accident. The locomotive then spent several months in the roundhouse at Temple before finally being donated to the Railroad and Heritage Museum in 2005. Weighing 249,000 pounds, or about 113 tons, and at 56 feet and 2 inches, or just over 17 metres in length, number 1680 has an EMD 567C V16 two-stroke diesel engine, delivering 1,750 horsepower. This powers a GM D12B generator to drive 4 GM D37 traction motors, one on each axle, which give the locomotive a top speed of 65 miles an hour. Santa Fe caboose number 1556 was built in 1927 by the American Car and Foundry Company, who also operated a factory at Trafford Park, Manchester, UK from 1903, building the Baker Street and Waterloo Railway and Great Northern, Piccadilly and Brompton Railway 1906 stock for the London Underground. Caboose number 1556 was refurbished in 1960 to 1970 and is painted in a 1927 colour scheme. It joined the museum's rolling stock in 1988. AT&SF diesel number 2301 was built in 1937 by Alco in Schenectady, New York, and is the oldest surviving AT&SF diesel in existence, being the second Alco diesel purchased by the AT&SF. It worked in San Diego Yard until 1964. 2301 was sold to a grain company and worked on until 1992. It was rescued in 1993 and cosmetically restored to AT&SF colours by the museum. Clover Glade Pullman sleeper car was originally named Dunvargin. This sleeper car was built in 1913 by the Pullman Company, who operated it on the Pennsylvania Railroad until 1935. Buffer to buffer, it's 83 feet 11 inches or 25.6 metres long. Rebuilt and renamed Clover Glade, This car travelled on the Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad until 1948. The Pullman Company retired the car in 1948, but the MKT Railroad purchased and kept it in service into the late 1950s. Clover Glade is an example of an 8-5 car, with 8 open berths in one section and 5 private bedrooms. Each Pullman car had an assigned porter who was available around the clock attending to the passengers. Clover Glade was donated to the museum in 1995. In late 1943, the US Office of Defense Transportation ordered 2,400 troop sleepers from the Pullman Company. They were converted from boxcars or built new based on American Railroad's 50-foot 6-inch steel boxcar. Pullman Troop Sleeper number 9826 could berth 30 men in 10 triple-deck bunks. Pine Mesa Amtrak Sleeper number 2986 was built by the Budd Company of Philadelphia in 1950 for the Santa Fe Railway. It operated on Santa Fe's Texas Chief service that ran between Chicago and Houston from 1948 until 1967. It was then transferred to the new National Railroad Passenger Corporation, known as Amtrak, in 1972. Pine Mesa travelled over 1 million miles before it was finally retired in 1988. And Pine Mesa came to the museum in 1998. It's amazing to think that the last pre-Amtrak sleeping cars in the passenger car fleet were not retired until 2001. All of the Pine series of sleeper cars were 85 feet, almost 26 metres long, and had what was called a 10-6 configuration, having 10 roomettes and 6 bedrooms. Roomettes were small sleeping compartments made for one passenger, and 2 passengers could sleep in the double bedrooms. Steam locomotive number 3423 was built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works, Philadelphia, in 1921 as a coal-burning passenger steam locomotive. The locomotive has a 462 or Pacific wheel arrangement and could reach speeds in excess of 100 miles an hour. The Pacific class was the predominant steam passenger locomotive type during the first half of the 20th century. The 3400 series were built with 74-inch driving wheels, but from 1935 to 1941, the AT&SF rebuilt them as oil burners with 79-inch box-pock wheels. The tender carried 20,000 US gallons, 75,700 litres of water, and 7,000 gallons of fuel oil, 26,495 litres. Originally operating on the Atchison, Topeka and Santa Fe Railroad in the Illinois Division, this locomotive came to Texas in 1944. The engine spent the rest of its operational life in service in the Galveston, Temple, Brownwood, Cleburne area and retired from service in 1952. It was donated to the city of Temple in 1955, originally being placed on fence display outside the Santa Fe Hospital in Temple. When the museum relocated to its present site in 2001, the engine moved with the museum. Well, that brings our tour of the Temple Railroad and Heritage Museum to a close. I'm really glad that I was able to make the trip. It was well worth it. Thanks so much for watching, and I do hope to see you drop by again soon. Let's leave the final word to AT&SF number 3423 as we prepare to depart Temple, Texas.
See it, say it, sorted.